Hey guys, I'm Kat from the Motorhome travel website Wandering Bird, where we share tips and tricks for touring the UK and Europe by motorhome and campervan. Now I know there are an awful lot of people who are brand new to motorhoming and campervanning who are off on their very first adventure, or you're going off really soon. And I've been getting loads of questions both in our Facebook group and over email. I thought it'd be useful to share some basic beginner motorhome tips just to get you going, because motorhoming is one of those really weird hobbies where you spend an awful lot of money and then just sort of have to go off and figure it all out for yourself. There are very little training or courses or anything that you can do, which is why our website has been so popular lately, because we share lots of tips on there for people who are going to get started. So I'll leave the link for you if you want to go check those out. But I thought this would be useful to just share some really basic beginner tips for either people who are brand new or people who haven't done it for a while and want a quick refresher. If I don't share a tip that you think is really important, by all means please do drop it in the comments below so that everyone else can benefit. And if you want to get your free motorhome departure checklist, which has also got a list of pre-trip checks that you need to do before you go, I did a video on that the other week, so again the link to the video I'll leave in the notes, but you can get a checklist that you can download, print off, take with you, just to make sure that you're ready to go on whenever your next trip may be. Right, let's get started. So our very first tip, if you're brand new and you've got a brand new van or new to you van, is take the time to go through it and figure out how it all works. So you'll probably have some sort of manual with you, and you need to figure out how your electric works, how your heating system works, how your water system works, how you empty the waste, how you empty the toilet, how you use the toilet. Don't forget to open it before you use it and then close it up again afterwards to prevent any smells. All these basic systems which, if you take the time to go through them whilst the van's parked on your drive or whilst it's parked up in storage, will make your life a lot easier when you get onto a campsite. Now obviously if you do store your motorhome in a storage yard or some place where you can't get electric, you might not be able to test everything out. Which brings us to tip number 2, is test your electrical systems thoroughly and understand how they work. One of the biggest misconceptions that a lot of people who are new to motorhoming make is that they expect it to be like a house, so the electric just works, so your 3-pin plugs just work whenever you like, even when you're parked at the side of the road. The important thing to understand is that if you aren't plugged into main, so if your cable isn't connected from your motorhome to a main supply, whether that's on a campsite or at your house, your 3-pin 230 or 240 if you're old school, your 3-pin plugs won't work. So your electric kettle, your toaster, your microwave, your television if you have a normal TV, any of those things that you might be used to won't work, including your hairdryer, which is apt actually at the moment because I have wet hair. So none of those things will work until you're plugged into mains. The other thing to remember is that even when you are plugged into mains at a campsite, you cannot turn on your microwave and your kettle and your toaster and your hairdryer all at the same time, because you'll blow a fuse. Probably you'll blow the fuse on your pitch. If you're really unlucky, you'll trip the fuse for the entire campsite. And if you're really, really unlucky, this will all happen in the middle of the night, in the dark, and you'll have to go out in your pajamas and try and figure out how to fix it and make it all come back on again. So the important thing to understand is that you've got electric when you're plugged into mains, but you've only got to have a limited amount and you've got to measure that amount. Unfortunately, campsites vary from point to point, so it's not always really obvious how much electric you can get away with using, but just anticipate that it will be a lot less than what you'll be used to in your home. Whilst we're talking about systems in the van, you will probably find it helpful to have 2 gas bottles, but only if you have space to safely store them. Most motorhomes, certainly most modern motorhomes, have got space for 2 gas bottles, certainly 2 6-kilogram ones, possibly not 2 bigger ones. If you have a camper van, you might only have space for 1, so don't put a second gas bottle on if you don't have space to store it safely. But if you do have the space, you'll find having 2 bottles a heck of a lot easier. Both because you've got more gas, obviously, but also if one runs out, you'll have a spare. And get in the habit of when one runs out to change it or refill it if you have refillable systems. Talking of which, if you're planning on spending most of your time in the UK, I don't believe you need refillable gas because it's harder to find in the UK. If you're planning on spending most of your time in Europe, then a refillable gas system is definitely worth investing in. But if you're starting out and you're planning on spending a week here and there around the UK while you get the hang of it, don't bother spending your money on a refillable gas system at this moment. The same thing goes for generator. You don't need one right now unless you're planning on spending all of your time off-grid, which, let's face it, in the UK is getting harder and harder and harder. You don't need to invest in a generator, and the same with a second leisure battery. If you're planning on spending a day or two camped up in a field, or using a CS or a CL site, a small site, or even using a wild camping spot, you probably won't need a second leisure battery. If you're planning on spending weeks exploring Norway and you're going to be totally off-grid, then a second leisure battery could be really useful, but again, only if you've got the appropriate place to store it. In our motorhome at the moment, she says, trying to remember, I'm pretty sure in our motorhome at the moment we've only got space for one. In our motorhome, the last motorhome we had space for two in the battery compartment, but most motorhomes have only got space for one to be stored properly. So don't just add a second leisure battery for the sake of it, because most motorhomes don't need it, and you probably, certainly if you're going to spend most of your time on a campsite, you definitely don't need it. And again, we've got an entire post on how to pick a leisure battery, how to maintain it. I'll leave the link for that in the notes below for you. Our next tip, and this one I think is really important, is figure out how to turn your lights on in the dark. Now, I know that sounds really stupid, but when you're coming in late at night and you're trying to reach above your head to the control panel, if your control panel's near your hab door, you open the door and you're trying to figure out which button to press to put the light on so that you can see what you're doing. It's a pain. So there will probably be a power button that you have to press and then a light button that you have to press to turn the lights on so that you can see what you're doing for everything else. Learn where those buttons are by feel, so figure out where they are on the van. I think ours is bottom right and then bottom left. Maybe second one up on the left. Yeah, see, I know it by feel, I can't remember it now by looking at it. But yeah, so learn which one, where the main power button is for your control panel, and then how you turn your lights on when it's pitch black and you can't see a thing. Alternatively, use your light on your phone if you want to be really clever, but a number of times we've done it and either haven't had the phones with us if we've been out for a walk or something, or just haven't thought to use our phones and we're trying to flail around. So that's definitely going to be something useful that you can do. A couple more tips before you actually get going on your trip is turn the fridge on a few hours at least before you plan on set off, ideally overnight, because it takes a while to get cold. Certainly if you're planning on using the freezer, it does take a few hours to get really cold, and you don't want to be taking food out of your fridge, putting it into the motorhome fridge and the fridge not be cold enough. So turn it on as soon as possible. Like I say, 12 hours is probably good enough time. And also, for your first trip or your first trip or two, don't overpack. I know how tempting it is to just kit it all out like you could go anywhere and you could be invincible, you never have to come home ever again. But for your first few trips, try and keep your weight to a bare minimum, certainly in terms of clothes and food and all the other bits. Partly because if you do find a problem or something's not working right and you have to crawl through all your lockers and cupboards and stuff, you don't want to have to keep moving things out the way. It's going to get really frustrating. Secondly, until you actually spend time in the van and figure out how you live, how the rhythm of your day is, how it all works, you don't know really where you want to put stuff. For example, I get up early, I'm an early bird, that's how my body clock works. So if I get up, and then we discovered that something that I wanted when I was up early in the morning was actually underneath where our bed was, that would be really frustrating. So we have arranged our van so that I can get up early and do whatever I want to be doing, so that it works with how we're using the van. The other thing to remember is your payload. If you don't understand what I mean by payload, again, I'll leave a link below to help explain it, but it's basically how much stuff you can carry before your motorhome goes over the maximum limit it's allowed. And it's really hard to judge. Certainly it's really hard to judge by looking at it, because it's so easy to just fill up the space that you've got in your van and not realise that you could have half your lockers empty and be over your maximum permissible laden mass, which is what the MTPLM stands for. So once you've got your bare essentials on there, I would always suggest going to a weighbridge with you and all your other passengers on, and your pets if you can, and get weighed so that you know what your motorhome weighs with that bare minimum kit on it, especially once you've got things like an awning and a solar panel and an extra battery if you're planning on fitting one, and an extra gas bottle. All those bits that add up that people forget about, make sure that you've taken that all into account, and then you can start figuring out how much extra stuff you can put on board. Okay, some other tips, and some of these are genius. I asked this question in our Facebook group, what tips would you give to beginners, or what stories have you got to help anybody out? And some old people have shared some genius stories, they really are. If you want to join the group, I'll leave the link below. But some of these stories, I just had to share some with you. So somebody's helpful tip was don't confuse your fuel and your water tanks. And I think they put fuel in their water tank, which it is sadly fairly easy to do because it's just a flap and a filler cap, and if you don't really understand, then it's easy to get wrong. If you do that, you make sure that you drain it all down properly, get it all cleaned out. I'd probably try and get it professionally cleaned out. But yes, make sure that you don't confuse the two, and if you put water into your fuel, you're going to need to call a garage or your breakdown cover to fix that one for you. So try not to get those two mixed up. Another helpful tip is to make sure that you fill up with your water before you settle in on your campsite. So many people, they've settled in, they've leveled up, they've even got their awnings out and their outdoor furniture, and then they've remembered that they've got an empty water tank and they need to go and fill it. And unless you're really lucky and there happens to be a tap that you can stretch your hose to, you're going to have to drive your van. So make sure that once you get to a campsite, you fill up with your water and then you go to your pitch and settle in. Along those same lines, when you're using your levelling chocks, another tip is to drive forwards onto the levelling chocks rather than trying to reverse back onto them. I don't know why it makes a difference, but for us certainly it's easy to go forwards onto them. So that might help make things a little bit easier for you. And lastly, for tips for getting to the campsite for your first time, try and have an easy meal all prepared, or just something that you can shove in an oven and just can warm up, or have a slow cooker ready so that that can just be cooking while you're doing other things. Try and keep it as simple as possible for your first night or two, because it's all going to be new to you. You're going to be learning an awful lot of stuff, and then trying to cook a massive dinner for however many people happen to be in your motorhome or van, it's just going to be one extra issue or stress, and you don't want that. It's supposed to be fun. So try and make it as easy as you possibly can for the first few nights. Couple more extra tips before I finish off. One, once you're driving your motorhome, obviously you're going to get into the swing of it all and you'll get better, but keep an eye out for overhanging trees or branches or things that you don't even really think about when you're driving a car, because obviously you're so much taller now in your motorhome. So yeah, keep an eye out for those things that sneak up on you, like overhanging branches. If you're trying to keep your motorhome this story made me laugh. If you're trying to keep your motorhome clean and you decide that you're not going to let any muddy footwear into your van, and you leave your muddy boots or shoes outside, don't then drive off and leave them behind outside or squished under your van. Make sure that you clean up before you go anywhere and that you don't leave any of your muddy footwear behind. I can't remember the name of the lady who shared that story, but it made me laugh. So yeah, it's so easy to do. Leave a reminder or something somewhere that you've got footwear outside that you need to get before you go. Another really good tip is to fit wing mirror protectors. Now, these are little cases that go over your wing mirrors. They're brilliant. I cannot stress enough how useful they have been. Nobody ever sets out to accidentally scrape against a wall or to have another vehicle come in the other direction and clip their mirror. But motorhome wing mirrors are really expensive, and if you can save having to replace them every however many times it happens, then they're definitely going to be worth their weight in gold. There are two types. You can either get short arm or long arm ones, so make sure that you get the right type for your van, but they're definitely worth buying. An alternative option is either paint the back of your wing mirrors bright colours, so bright yellow or bright pink, or put a reflective stripe down the back of them, so just something that catches the other driver's eyes so they're paying attention to that, and then they're more likely to not underestimate the gap between them and you and clip your wing mirror. So that really helps. And lastly, my last tip for anyone who's brand new to motorhoming is do not overplan your trip. I know how easy it is, because I'm so guilty of this, to go, right, we're going to go here, and we're going to go this, and we're going to see this, and we're going to do this, and you've got the whole thing planned out every single day. But A, you're going to be learning a lot of stuff about motorhoming and how to live on a campsite and how it all works. But also, it's supposed to be fun and relaxing, she says. Still guilty of this so many years later. But try and give yourself time to either visit somewhere that you didn't know was there, or just to chill, relax by the fire, enjoy a glass of wine as long as you're not driving, and just enjoy your new holiday. So I hope you found those helpful. We've got loads of these. We've just put together a whole list of them. I think there's, I don't know how many there are on there now. It started off as 27 and then I just keep adding them, so I don't know how many are left. But I'll leave the link to that post below, along with all the other links that I've mentioned in this video. And if you want to get more tips to help you out, then by all means go and read those, and I hope you find them useful. Don't forget, if you want to grab your motorhome departure checklist, then the link to that is below as well. I think that's everything from me. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to get more motorhome tips in the future, then by all means hit subscribe and the little bell, and you'll be notified when our next video comes out. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you on the road. Take care. Bye. We are out. We're talking